Hello and welcome back to another cosplay build! Do you all remember when Genshin first came out? It was like early pandemic, and I know I for one spent like a good 17 plus hours binging the game non-stop because I was in isolation and there was not much else to do. That game meant a lot to me throughout COVID and kept much of my inspiration and creativity alive while I was stuck inside and in isolation. 4 years later, I don't play the game much anymore, but I am still obsessed with the character designs and forever grateful for that time spent keeping my creativity and my love for cosplay strong. So I decided it was finally time to show my appreciation for the game by making the most obnoxiously large pair of dragon wings you have ever seen. Yes, Storm Terror, later known as DVALIN. For me, it was love at first sight and I knew I wanted to cosplay it someday, but I didn't think it would actually happen. You know that feeling of having a dream project that one day it'll exist, but it's also a dream project, so you're not entirely sure if it's actually gonna happen? Well, for me, that day actually came because I ripped it from the corners of my imagination and forced it into reality in the span of 3 months because I wanted to debut it at Katsucon. The main focus of this project was, of course, the wings. They needed to be not only gigantic, but also transportable and transparent. I had spent several weeks beforehand researching different ways that I could do this, but most techniques I came across were either not durable enough or opaque. So I decided to do a little bit of experimenting and try something completely new, never done before. It's probably been done before, but I haven't seen it documented, so therefore it is new to me. My idea was to create the wings out of epoxy resin. It's strong, transparent, and has endless possibilities for color combination. The only problem is it's expensive. So before I went full force into this project, I decided to try it out on a smaller scale, which resulted in fairy wings for Aether. I will list the link to that project in the description below, but needless to say, the trial run was a success, so it was time to move on to the final boss. So enough of current me, let's scoot on back to the past and go make a giant dragon.
Step 1 with any massive build was to draft the pattern to scale so I could get a solid idea of what I was getting myself into. For the pattern placement, I ended up referencing a fan art done by Deona Sith on Instagram, since I really like how they laid out the wings and the official art is a little harder to reference. The rough plans were then cut out and transferred onto interfacing fabric so I could layer the pieces as they would be in the final form. You can see I've layered certain pieces on the wings to add dimension to the build instead of one flat piece. The base of these wings are a highly flexible, lightweight, 2mm acrylic sheet. This provides the structure with durability without sacrificing transparency or too much weight. These sheets also come with protective covers, making it easy to draw on the patterns and then peel off the layers when finished. Once everything is cut out, you can see how I've designed the top 2 wings into sections. These were the points that made the most sense as separation spots for travel.
Before we continue, a little PSA, because epoxy resin is highly toxic and cancer-causing, so wear your safety gear. You need a respirator that is rated at an N95 or greater for toxic fumes, as well as gloves, because you do not want to get that stuff on your skin. I can speak from experience that it is a pain in the arse to get off, and just not good for your skin at all. Make sure you're also working in a well-ventilated space, because as the epoxy resin dries, it continuously releases fumes over time.
Finally, it was on to the point of no return, adding the resin. Once the resin is cured, there's no going back, so I took the time beforehand to experiment with different color combinations and thicknesses. DVALIN has a very blue theme with hints of green and purple and lighter vein-like designs. I also took the liberty to add a heck ton of sparkles because no magic dragon is complete without them. Before working on the main wings, I made the small top sections first. By making these separately, it added more depth and helped the wings to look layered. Once dry, I traced these pieces out on the main wings to ensure there was empty space to glue them on later. Once I had my chosen colors, it was time to pour. This is where the different techniques I've been learning really came into play. Depending on how long I let each section dry, it would determine the hardness of the lines or how well the colors blended in together. The lighter vein details needed to be definite lines, but also start to merge near the ends. So as they were drying, I would clean up the edges until it was almost cured before adding the other colors. This is where the project was extremely time consuming, as I had to check in on it every few hours or so to make sure everything was drying in the right shape. After each layer added, I also went over it with a heat gun. This just removes all the air bubbles that get created from aggressive mixing, which please mix aggressively, because the better it's mixed, the more it will harden and the less likely it will to be sticky in places. The last thing you want is a patch of uncured resin on your wings constantly picking up various bits of fluff and fabric. Once these lines were firm but still a little sticky, I started adding blues to the rest of the sections, working my way from a light blue to a midnight at the tips where I wanted the design to blend out. The cool part about pouring resin onto a flat sheet like this is that the surface adhesion causes the resin to stop at the edge, so as long as you don't over pour, it will stick to the shape of the plastic. These sections were then left to completely dry before adding the rest of the midnight blue. I wanted the tips to be a nice gradient, while the lighter blue sections would have a more definitive line between colors for the areas closer in. Once everything was completely dry, I could finally remove the plastic covering from the other side and line up the different sections. Keeping the plastic layer on the bottom side was extremely helpful because any resin puddles leaking through would be peeled off with the plastic. I then grabbed the completed top sections from before and glued everything into place using clear resin. When adding resin between layers, I have to go really slow to remove any air bubbles caught, and also keep in mind that this was going to be two separate pieces so that I could separate them for travel. For this video, I'm just showing how the top wings were made, but it was the same process for the others, and after a full month of work, all 6 wings were finally complete. The moment of laying them all out on the floor and realizing just how big they were really made me seriously second guess all my choices, but my bank account told me that I was already too invested to back out now, so the next phase was on to making something to strap these monsters to my back. The structure for the wing is all PVC piping, which is super strong but hollow and easy to reshape when heated. 2cm pipes were used to line the wing, following the curves by slowly heating them up. Again, we're working with some very toxic plastic fumes, so wear your safety gear. You gotta be really patient with this step and fully let the pipe cool while you hold it in place before moving on so it keeps its new shape, because we're not a huge fan of straight things here. I forgot to film this part, but the pipes were attached using zip ties and holes drilled into either side to keep them in place. For the harness system, I really lucked out in finding some scrap plastic sheets and padded cloth. The plastic was used for a base to hold larger PVC piping, which the pipe on the wings could slide into. The pipe was again heated into shape with the bottom section squished down to avoid bulkiness. Everything was screwed together tightly to make sure there would be no weak points, and slits were cut into the plastic for the straps. Originally I used Velcro on the straps, but that ended up being a disaster as it wasn't strong enough and the Velcro kept on catching on the fabric, so I later replaced all those with buckles. If I just fast forward to the end for a moment, you can see where I've put the buckles for best support. Basically the same layout as a hiking backpack, with a hip strap and 2 shoulder straps connected with a chest strap. With this system, most of the weight should end up on the hip strap, so you're able to carry it for longer periods of time. Back to our previous stage in the crafting process, with the harness all set up, the wings just slot into place. I needed to do some minor adjustments warming up the pipe again once I could see how they would all sit, but overall everything laid out really nicely, and of course I had to do a little mini try on just to fuel the excitement of actually having wearable wings. Then came the very painful moment of cutting them in half. This was low-key terrifying because it felt like I was destroying everything, but I did need them to fit on an airplane, so tough luck. The connection was quite simple, with just a plumbing joint screwed to one side and the other pipe fitting snugly in for easy disassembly. All the pipe was then sprayed black to better hide it, and I reinforced the zip ties with cosplay grade hot glue at the connection points. Time to add the finishing touches and turn the pipes into wing muscle. The horns at the top were made the same way as his head horns, so I'll go into more detail on that a bit later, but essentially they're just toilet paper rolls, tape, foam clay, and latex. For the feathers, I sent 7 different files to the Cricut cutter, making, goodness, I don't even know, but probably at least 200 feathers. Each feather was hand textured with an X-Acto knife using the heat gun to seal the foam and deepen the line details as the foam shrinks with the heat. I then primed the foam with spray-on Mod Podge and painted with 4 different blues, which I absolutely realize is rather excessive, but by layering the colors, I was able to get a really nice depth in each feather. This whole process was 3 long days of cutting, painting, and gluing, starting with the larger feathers at the ends and slowly getting smaller near the core to simulate growing wing feathers. After this, I have so much respect for people who do the full feather build because individual feathers are a nightmare, but worth it because it looks so good. And before we move on, let's just take a moment to appreciate the finished wings. I'm pretty sure I just stared at them for like 2 hours at 3 a.m. because I could not believe they were actually done. But at this point, I only had a few days left and needed actual clothing to wear. I lost precious time getting sidetracked and fell in love with this macaw pattern, but after trying it on, I looked more like a Victorian equestrian vampire, so I went back to my original plan of making a corset vest. This design used a normal vest as the base pattern with significant alterations and a lot of inspiration taken from those viral men's corset vests we've been seeing on TikTok, but I'm too stubborn and had to make my own, with help from the best supervisor ever. The fabric color placement followed that of a typical dragon underbelly design, accented with this gorgeous shimmer fabric for the boning channels. For the corset boning, I used extra large zip ties heated into shape to follow the curve. Zip ties are a great cheap alternative to typical boning as they're easy to work with and still provide decent structure. I totally missed filming this part, but the back lace-up is reinforced with horsehair braid on the inside and edged with a lighter blue bias tape to complement the silver grommets. Part of the reason for the lace-up corset design was to allow a place for the wings to emerge while still having a tight-fitted vest. The front was reinforced with smaller zip ties and hook and eye attachments were added for the clasps. I decided that I wanted big, puffy sleeves, so instead of buying a new shirt, I just combined 2 that I already have because that's apparently where I drew the line for making stuff. The final touch to the outfit was a little butt cape to represent his tail. I added creases along the sides to create a feather-like look and attached it with snaps along the sides. Using this random old wire piece I found, I also added the cool little wispy tail feathers he has. The pants were super basic and just white leggings with a shiny blue star sewn on either side, copying the in-game design. To add more dragon vibes, I also threw together some dragon scale black bracers and knee-high black boots to tie the whole look together. Alright, so remember when I mentioned toilet paper horns? I used the same technique for the head horns, crafting the base with toilet paper rolls and taping it all together with painter's tape. This provides the lightweight base structure which I temporarily pinned to the wig head by gluing on fabric scraps. To get the horn shape and texture, I added a thick layer of foam clay, which is basically exactly what it sounds like and is just moldable foam that can then be smoothed down with water and left to dry. After drying for 24 hours, I sanded out some ridges with the Dremel tool and added a layer of liquid latex. If you are allergic to latex, Mod Podge and wood glue are also good options, but this layer is to prime the foam and add some texturing to the surface. Latex is my preferred one to use since it dries fast and helps to add a natural glossy finish to the paint. I always have a lot of fun painting detailed horns like this because the color gradient is so satisfying to me, and then going in with shading and highlighting, watching it all come together just really scratches that creative itch, and I always spend extra time playing with the colors until I'm fully happy with the details. For the wig, I grabbed a base off of Epic Cosplay wigs and used the airbrush to also give it a blue gradient to tie the wig into the rest of the outfit and mimic the look he has around his horns. The horns were clipped into place with alligator clips, and I made a few extra feather details to have the feather theme more coherent throughout the whole design. With that, the wig was complete, and I absolutely love how it all flows from the horns and merges into feathery tips. It just looks and feels very dragon to me. At this point, there was no time to do a makeup test since I was flying out in 2 days to Katsucon. Not to mention my apartment is literally too short for me to actually wear the wings inside. So it was time to take apart the wings, wiggling them out of their sockets and safely packing them into a giant box for travel. Having this feature was really important to me not only for travel purposes, but also for storage. Cosplay takes up way too much room as is, and sadly I don't have an extra wall to permanently mount these on. But finally, it was time for the big debut. Thank you so much to everyone who came to say hi at Katsucon. It was an absolute whirlwind and highly intense project, so to have so much appreciation and excitement for the build in person really was an incredible way to end this project.
And there you have my DVALIN Cosplay build. Thank you so much for watching. This project is such a huge milestone in my own cosplay journey, not only for a showcase of all the skills I've learned over the past few years, but also a challenge to myself to kind of show me what I want to do in the future going forward, and to constantly improve my skills and make giant, ridiculous pieces of art. So needless to say, I am feeling incredibly inspired by this, and I am so excited for the future of my own cosplay journey. If you have any unanswered questions from this cosplay build, I do have other tutorials available and will link the related ones in the description below. Also, if you're interested in watching the shenanigans that went around with debuting this at Katsucon, I have a vlog available, so you can go watch there. Lastly, if you found this video helpful or enjoyable, or you like what I do, maybe consider checking out my Patreon, or dropping a donation, or just subscribing, commenting, liking, sharing. I know it's sometimes a big ask, but these projects are very expensive and time consuming. So any form of support for artists like myself is so incredibly appreciated and allows us to keep on doing what we do and what we love and share it with you. Bye!